talking about spiritual
Ooh.
and emotional health
Oh, I love that.
and how they play together. Many times the greatest revelations and supernatural impactful moments in your life are coupled with emotional healing as well.
Absolutely. If we just want to spiritualize everything, we're going to have a very immature, undeveloped soul.
Right.
Yes.
And if we just want to spiritualize everything about our health, we're probably going to have a body that's uncared for
So true.
and unloved and unattended to, where that's not what Jesus modeled.
Talking about spiritual
Ooh.
and emotional health
Oh, I love that.
and how they play together in this world. And so there's two thoughts I'd like to throw out, and then we kind of go, we can kind of jump into it, just have a conversation. So there's a ton of talk today, everywhere you go, it seems, about church hurt.
Yes.
Church hurt. And while I believe it's real, because there's people, there's people hurt everywhere you go, for sure.
Yeah.
But it seems like most of what you hear is just very antagonistic, throw the church out, sort of approach because of that hurt, which just probably signifies there is a hurt, but I don't know that is it, I'm just, a lot of deconstruction because of my hurt. And so there's that piece. And the other piece is it feels like sometimes within the church, I love Pete Scazzaro and a lot of his writings as he talks about how oftentimes spiritual disciplines are used as a Band-Aid for emotional pain that actually become more harmful than good. In terms of the spirit. So how do you, being a professional therapist, and yet have been a pastor or a believer, follow Jesus, how do you blend these two worlds in a way? Because I see on one side, I had this exact conversation just yesterday,
Really?
with a young man, and crisis moment. Won't go into all of it, but just crisis moment. And he's reaching out to me, and he's like, "I'm just believing God's going to do a miracle and change this." And it's a marriage situation, and I'm like, the amount of pain that y'all have inflicted on each other right now, like, yes. And there's probably some really good therapy needed to have some real conversations about this deep, deep wound that's going on. So I find myself sort of, because I grew up in the church, sometimes, and I love the healing power of the Spirit of God. I love all. I mean, I do. I believe all that. But I find myself recoiling a little bit at times, like,
Me too.
slow down, so, because, and maybe that's my bad. I don't know, but it's, I don't deny that, but I kind of go like, what's the process? So how do you help us? How do you blend those two worlds together in a way that's not diminishing of either of those?
That's so.
That makes sense?
That's so
Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
Waylon. Thank you. What a great question. I think I've been forced to think deeply about these things.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because I grew up with a lot of personal trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah. My dad was physically, emotionally, sexually abusive.
Yeah.
And he had his own trauma. And we ended up being very, very close.
Yeah.
He's very dear to my heart. I talk
Sure.
about him, I still
Yeah.
choke up. And then I became a Christian around 14, and then my parents became Christians later in life.
Right.
And so when I was around 16, we started going to this great church, and the youth pastor sexually assaulted me, right?
Right.
So, you can go, well, the church is just horrible and screwed up.
Sure.
Or you can go, no, this one human hurt me.
Right. Right.
It's not all the people
Right.
are
Sure.
bad.
Right.
We've always got to be sorting. I call it sorting the laundry.
Yeah. No, it's good.
And if we take all the clothes in our house and put it all in the dirty clothes,
Right.
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It's like, no, I already washed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, kids, put that away in your drawer. Don't throw it
Right.
on the floor.
Right.
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 You know,
So good.
so we've got to always be sorting through it. Like with sex, you've got to sort through.
Right.
Like what's sweet and wonderful and good, and what was awful and horrible and frightening and terrorizing.
Yeah.
We've got to sort through it.
Yeah.
And so I think we've got to do that in all of our human relationships.
Yes.
But if we haven't paused long enough to think more deeply about this, then we're going to go amiss with it.
Yeah.
And we're going to we're going to generalize it
Right.
and say the whole church is bad. And I'm like, oh my goodness. The church is to this day doing wonderful things.
Sure.
And helping people and feeding people and healing the brokenhearted.
Yeah.
And so I think we've got to kind of go back, at least for me, like in Isaiah, Scripture says, and then it's Jesus's mission statement.
Yeah. Right.
In Isaiah and Luke, I came to heal the brokenhearted.
Right.
So for me, I remember going, oh, we all have had our hearts broken.
Yeah.
Welcome to humanity.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Welcome to being a human. If your parents didn't break your heart, then friends did, then a boyfriend did, then somebody in the church did, a teacher did, a coach did. Somebody's
Yes.
gonna mess with you,
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
and you're gonna have your heart broken.
Right.
Yes.
And then I think another thing I've really thought about is Paul says, hey, you work out your salvation.
Yeah.
This isn't, there are no magic wands here.
Right.
Like
right.
you were
right.
saying to this young man, like, hey,
Yeah.
dude,
Right.
Yeah.
you guys have inflicted so much pain on each other. There's
Right.
the miracle is going to be if this can be resolved.
Right. Exactly. Right.
If you guys can come to the place of doing repair work.
Yeah.
Right.
That will be the miracle.
Yes.
And you're still going to have to learn how
Right.
to do a
Absolutely right.
boatload of repair work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's just work.
It
Right.
is. It is absolutely.
You know, and here's my concern. I've observed this. I got to observe this in my dad. He was an alcoholic and a rageaholic, and then he got radically saved. And then he became what I called a religious aholic.
Yeah. Yeah.
One addiction substituted for the other.
Right.
And that's why when people say, oh, God did a miracle and delivered me, I'm like, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you. And you still need to go to AA.
Right.
Yes.
Because you have an alcoholic personality.
Right. Right.
You have an addict's personality.
Yeah.
And it's going to come out of you in some very intense, radical ways. So you need your personality softened. You need to go do, we need spiritual transformation.
Right.
And then we need soul renovation.
Right. Right.
My husband does renovations for a living.
Sure.
That's a slow, long process.
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
You don't go in and renovate a mess overnight.
Right.
It is a long process. And Isaiah says, go in and rebuild the ancient ruins.
Right.
So not only are you and I dealing with our own level of junk,
Right.
Yes.
Sure.
now we know from epigenetics, we're dealing with our great-grandparents.
Right. Sure.
And grandparents and parents. We're dealing with, they say now, up to like 293 years of stuff.
Wow.
Wow.
And so this is why when we can start just going unashamedly, we all have stuff.
Yes.
We all have skeletons in our closet.
Yeah.
We all have junk in our trunk. We got stuff.
Sure.
And, when we can accept that and go, hey, I'm going to be working on me until the day I die.
Right.
Yes.
I've got nothing figured out.
Right.
Hopefully I've come some distance, but I probably have a long way to go.
Totally.
And then we can just live humbly.
Right.
Yes.
And I think humility, we could define humility as leaning into our ignorance.
Yeah.
And I've got a ton of ignorance.
Right. Yeah. What I don't know.
And so that's why we've got to do this work on soul renovation the entire days of our lives.
Yeah.
And never stop.
Yeah. That's so good.
Sorry, I get on my
No, I
soapbox.
think it's so important because, people tend to be extreme in either direction.
Yes.
It's like we
Yes.
tend to gravitate towards extremity, for whatever. I'm not sure why that is even, but there's just something in us.
Well, don't you think it's, and I don't mean to be rude.
No, I
Don't you think it's
love
convenient
to hear it.
to hyper spiritualize everything.
Sure.
Like, well, the devil.
Yeah, no, I agree. Or God's going to have to just do this.
Oh, yeah. I'm waiting for my miracle. And I'm like, that's great.
Right.
And like, you've got some health issues. So perhaps you need to get to the gym.
Yeah.
Or you've got financial issues. Maybe you need to update your resume.
Yeah.
And start pounding the concrete to find a new job.
Right.
Like, stop waiting.
Right.
God made you in his image. So you have agency.
Totally.
He put agency inside of you because he wants you to think and act and move and get going.
Yeah.
Yes.
So good.
Yes. and I think, many times it's very convenient to place responsibility on God.
Yes.
And say,
and then be angry with him.
And then be angry.
Yeah.
Or,
God, you didn't come through for me.
Yes. And I think that throughout Scripture, God partners with us.
Yeah.
So
good.
I love that we can understand our dependency on God.
Yeah.
But I believe our dependency on God should have an outcome of, and now I'm partnering with God to see this thing come to fruition. I'm not looking only to myself, but God, please empower me to take responsibility.
That's so good.
Empower me to become what you've called me to be.
In 2005, I was diagnosed with lupus. And the doctor called me and says, you've got lupus. And I'm like, well, how bad?
Right.
It can't be too bad.
Right. Is this a mild case?
What is this? I got a cold.
Is there a cream for that?
And she's like, your blood work shows that you have one of the most severe cases of lupus I've ever seen. Wow. You have no autoimmune system. So I remember, and I could tell my body was just stiff and weird. And I kind of like waddled over to get in a chair. And I'm like, okay, God, so what's the plan?
Right. Right.
Because I always see myself, like we're yoked. Like I'm an oxen, he's an oxen.
Right.
We're yoked together.
Right.
Yeah.
So God, how are we going to plow this field?
What are we doing here? Yeah.
How are we going to plow
What's the plan?
this
It's good.
freaking field in front of my face that I don't even want to look at
Right.
right
Totally.
now?
So good.
And it's full of boulders and rocks and weeds. And couldn't I please have a nicer field?
Yeah. Always.
And once you get through the anger and the bargaining and the all that.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, now how are we going to plow this field? And so for me, it's like, I had to go gluten-free, dairy-free, no sugar, totally clean up my whole diet.
Yeah.
I had to do all these things. And I remember when I got well,
Right.
we were at a party and I don't know, I think like I was well,
Right.
right?
Right.
Which even my doctor's like, your blood work's perfect.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, that was my miracle.
Right.
And it took 3 years of me working my tail off to get my miracle.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's still a miracle.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right? Because she said nobody gets well from lupus. And I'm like, I'm going to get well from, I'm
Right,
stubborn.
totally.
I'm like, I'm going to get well from lupus.
Yeah.
Because my God heals.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so I remember like reaching for a cookie and I just felt the Holy Spirit say, excuse me.
Right.
And I'm like, well, but I'm well.
Right.
And this is just me.
Sure.
I don't, this isn't for you or anybody else. It's for me. And I just felt like the Lord said to me, hey, you have to honor your healing.
So good.
If you think you can just go back to doing life how you used to do life, no.
Wow.
You're going to have to honor what we have done here
So
together. And I'm like, kind of like, yes, sir.
Honoring your healing is good.
Okay. I can't do life the way I used to do life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's so good. I think for me in these conversations, and maybe thinking of Dana, I think actually I've heard, maybe it's Scazzaro who says this, but he talks about many times the greatest revelations and supernatural impactful moments of your life are coupled with emotional healing as well.
Absolutely.
So like when I get emotional, for me, my experience has been when I have an emotional breakthrough, there's a spiritual breakthrough at the same time.
Absolutely.
They coincide.
They
like
do.
if I become aware of some dysfunctional pattern, paradigm, hurt, wound, whatever it is, and I just, suddenly now, and I'm processing through it and allowing the Lord to work in that through that work,
Yeah.
it's like they they coincide. The
They
spiritual
do.
and the emotional.
Well, don't you
They
think
work
that's
together.
why God says, like in 1 Thessalonians 5, like we're body, soul, spirit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he wants to perfect those.
Right, right.
And so
all of them. Yeah,
I think Jesus came to earth in a body to show us that our bodies are as spiritual
right.
as our spirits
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
are. Right. And
Right.
your soul
Yeah.
is deeply
Right,
spiritual.
Right.
absolutely.
And we've got to be doing and caring for all three of these parts of ourselves.
Yeah, it's so good.
And if we're not, if we just want to spiritualize everything, we're going to have a very immature, undeveloped soul.
Right.
Yes.
And if we just want to spiritualize everything about our health, we're probably going to have a body that's uncared for
So true.
and unloved and unattended to, where that's not what Jesus modeled.
right.
When he got
right,
tired, he took a
Right.
nap.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
When he got overwhelmed by people, he got away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, when he's hungry, he ate.
Yeah.
And yet, I don't know. I think sometimes we think, what do we think? We're more spiritual than Jesus?
Yeah.
You know, and so
Right,
it's like,
right.
it's like, no, you're not. You're tired. Like, go take a nap.
It's interesting because all the way back into church history, one of the Gnostic heresies that was in the foundation of church history, what they fought against heavily was people who said that which is physical or material is by nature evil, and only the spiritual is valuable. So this is why people would have these extreme physical things they would do. Like, it doesn't even matter, my body does. So therefore, people don't matter, stuff. And it just became this very error-laden approach, and it was just the spirit.
Right.
And it's like, wait. That doesn't work over the long haul when you just neglect one part of you
Yeah.
Right.
and focus on another part of you, which I think is sometimes, at least in my experience growing up, especially in charismatic Pentecostal circles,
Absolutely.
like, you just got to fast and pray. And I still do those things, but it's
Right.
like, it's also got to deal with the emotional pain or the wounds
Yes.
or, what I believe about myself or believed about an experience in my life.
Right.
That brings spiritual breakthrough
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Well, for like when I started really digging into the emotional parts of the lupus,
yeah.
the physical, the spiritual, the
Right,
emotional parts of it, what needed to happen in my soul. My soul carried so much rejection.
Wow.
And I was reading a book, and it's just like, God challenged me, like, will you be teachable? And I'm like, okay.
Sure. Okay.
Why not?
Yeah.
Well,
I'll
of
say
course,
yes
Lord.
To you.
And yeah, right. Of course.
I'm always
Okay,
teachable.
Always. It's like, yeah, well, let's have a conversation about that. And so, and the some of the emotional roots of lupus, and I had shingles at both at the same time,
Right.
long term,
Wow.
and they're both rejection. So I really had to do a lot of work around the rejection I grew up with that I did not ask for.
Right.
Wow.
And part of that piece included my grandmother. One day I just like, hey, Dad, did your mom grow up with a lot of rejection? And he's like, yeah, her mother died giving birth to her little sister. And then her father was a womanizer and did not want those little girls.
Wow.
So they grew up in foster care in the same town that their daddy lived in. But they weren't wanted.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so my grandmother had all this rejection. My dad did, and I did. And so, that had to be dealt with spiritually, emotionally,
Yeah.
physically, because it
Yeah.
affects you
Yeah.
It
in
does.
every way.
Yeah.
It does.
And we can't separate. Like you said,
Right.
when we separate out when we treat ourselves like we're parts,
Yes.
then something's going to be neglected.
Right.
And it's not going to go well. But when
Right.
we can put it all together and live holistically,
Yeah.
I'm body, soul, spirit.
Yes.
Yeah.
How am I living and putting all this together so I can live as a whole instead of broken into these parts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So if someone is pursuing emotional health and spiritual health,
Yeah.
one of the obstacles I run into a lot is I think that obviously we all need help in this process.
Oh, gosh, yes.
We all need and
Do not attempt this alone.
yeah, we need help, but we
Yeah,
need help. We need we have the Holy Spirit, but at the same point, we need sometimes a Jesus with skin on
Yes.
community. But even in
Yes.
community, it's tough. I think the right kind of community that is a healing, safe community.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole nother conversation probably. But
Yeah.
so let's say this is what I run into a lot: people who are like, okay, I want to deal with the emotional side of this thing. So I want to seek out a counselor, a therapist, because I will tell people. I told this situation even just recently. I was like, I'm not saying go to a pastor. I said go to a pastor for coverage, pastoral care, and concern. They might be able to give you a few little like, I'm here, I love you, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
But go find a good therapist, a good counselor, and a believer. Because I think that's an important part for just the foundations. Like they don't have to make everything about the Bible specifically, but
Right,
like
right.
I want to be on the same foundation with somebody if
Right.
I'm drawing from that. So
Right.
my question in all this is, how do you help someone find a good therapist? What are the questions they should be
Yeah.
asking? Because I don't think most people interview their therapist.
That's true.
I think they just think, well, you're registered, so
Right.
I'm gonna
So
it'll
I'm
be
gonna
around forever.
trust anybody
Yeah,
who's
I'll
registered,
just
right?
trust you. Like,
Yeah.
well, you have an office, so
Yeah.
you must be.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
must be, you must know what you're talking about. And what I have found is not every pastor knows what they're talking about, and not every therapist knows what they're talking about, and not every expert knows what they're talking about.
No.
And sometimes, like, I think this is one of those professions we sort of trust. Like, oh, well, you're a therapist, you're a counselor.
Don't do that.
And then, well, maybe I'm naive in it. Maybe I'm just too.
But I do think
I think I am.
I
I,
think most people
Yeah,
just
oh,
have that
no,
assumption.
I totally.
I think I actually had this conversation with you. Like, I
Yeah.
realized, like, I'm far too trusting with the counseling therapy
Yeah.
people. Like,
Yeah.
there's some quacks out there that don't know what they're
There
talking
are. It's like every field.
about. Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
And so, I have this saying that I think is so true. I didn't.
Yeah.
I heard this saying.
Sure.
I did not make up this saying.
Right.
When the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Right. Right.
And so I think it's like we start here.
Sure.
How am I teachable?
Sure. It's okay.
How open am I? Am I ready to face me?
Wow.
Because I'm telling you, when I first went to therapy, it was terrifying.
Sure.
And I'm just like, but I'd had a few days before that where I just cried all day.
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure out what's wrong with me. I tried my hardest to transfer it onto Ron.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was out cleaning the garage, and I
Right.
kept going out and like, "Are you okay today? Is something wrong with you?" And he's like, "I'm great.
Right.
I'm cleaning my garage."
I'm in the garage, man. This is
I know, and he's
my
so
happy place.
happy, and I'm like, "You're so annoying. I need you not to be okay because it
Right.
can't be me."
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It was terrifying to think.
Hmm.
I grew up in a home where it's like there better not be something wrong with you,
Right.
and you better hold it together.
Sure. Sure.
And so to think, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. It felt so terrifying, so shaming, so bad. And like, oh, what do I do with this? So I just spent the day crying and praying.
Right.
Really, like,
Right.
God, there's something wrong with me.
Right.
I have no idea what to do.
Right.
I knew nothing about this emotional journey because I grew up believing your emotions are bad. Just try not to have them.
Right. Yeah.
Or try only to have
Very
happy
common,
ones.
yeah.
Yes.
Only happy, positive.
Yeah.
And I'm a 7 Enneagram, so I could perfect that.
Yeah.
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 Happy,
you're gifted.
positive, cheerful.
Yeah.
We make the best of everything. There's a silver, lining to every horrible thing.
Uh-huh.
And, I had that dialed.
Yeah.
And then here I am, and I cannot dial it on that day. I cannot dial it. And I cry all day long. And so, but I did pray all day.
Right.
And it was just kind of like, God, help me. I mean, I couldn't even say anything else. Just like,
Right.
God, help me. I am bewildered.
Yeah.
And so then at the end of the day, after this excruciating day, I just remembered like, oh, wait, there's a counselor named Brock on our church staff. So the next day after church, I kind of went up to him sideways, like, I couldn't even look at him.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, hey, Brock, I think there's something wrong with me. Right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's all I had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Not like, hey, I'm having a soul cry. No, I had no idea.
Right.
And so he said, okay, well, come see me tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So, man, for like the next 3 years, I went Monday at 1 o'clock on Mondays.
Yeah.
Yes. But I remember that first day getting in his office, and I was there early for a change.
Sure.
And I sat on the couch, and I'm like, I think I'm
Right.
fine.
Yeah.
I just had a bad day.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I need to leave.
Yeah.
And darn, about the minute I was thinking
Yeah.
about leaving, he came and
He
said,
walks in.
come on back.
Mm-hmm.
And I go back and goes, well, tell me your story. And so I just, matter of fact, tell him my story. And
Right.
the man has the nerve to sit there and cry.
Mm.
I mean, he is crying.
Uh-huh.
And then I do what I do. I'm trying to rescue him.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
Right.
hey, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't that bad. I
Right.
survived.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I'm fine. He's like, you are so not fine.
Right.
He said, you have PTSD. And I'm like,
Right.
no, that's for war veterans.
Right. Right.
I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, no, you've had multiple layers of trauma,
Yeah.
and this is going to take us a long time, and we're just going to have to go on this journey.
Mm.
And honestly, the biggest thing for me was just like, okay,
Right.
dang it.
Just
I don't
showing
want to
up.
do this.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, okay, I'll do this for 6 months and then I'm going to be fine.
Yeah.
And then after 6 months, I had to go, oh, shoot, I'm not fine.
Right.
There's more work
Yeah.
to do. This is
Yeah.
this is really messy,
Yeah.
and it's really deep,
Yes.
and it,
Sure.
and so, yeah, I just surrender. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. And I went to some like secular sexual trauma groups for females and would listen to women like scream and yell and, throw
Right,
up and
right.
cuss. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot,
Yeah.
but it's like, hey, if the student's ready,
Right.
you may
Right.
not like this journey. I didn't like the journey. It was
Sure.
messy.
Sure.
And sometimes I'm like, I don't want to do this. We can't afford it. It takes too much time. And,
Right. Sure.
But
All the
I
reasons.
just like, he said to me one day, he goes, you're kind of a dog on a bone, aren't you? And I'm like, and he goes, because, you're just willing to do this no matter what it takes, aren't
Right,
you? And I'm like,
right.
I am, because
Yeah, at
I'm
that
just,
point.
I can't go back,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
to pretending like everything's
Yeah.
okay when really
Right.
in my soul, nothing's okay,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know?
That probably really is the point. I mean, you'll seek out and then probably discover the right connection,
Yeah.
the right fit. Lord
Yep.
can lead you. All of those things could be true.
Yeah.
But if you're not so ready for that, like so tired of where you're at
Yeah.
and just
Yes.
like ready to
Yeah.
grow, ready to do the work.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's amazing.
that's
I think
key.
it's so cool when we get sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, you're kind of like, okay,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Right. I'm
what
here.
needs to happen?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think you have to participate in
You
your own
do.
deliverance. You
Yeah.
can't
Oh.
have an expectation
Oh.
that even the right therapist
No.
Right.
is going to fix it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, Nancy, I could take, and we think you're the pinnacle of,
Yeah.
all therapists. But if someone's not ready to do
Oh,
the work,
gosh. Yeah.
they could sit with you for 6 years
I'm sure it's
and
happened.
not
Yeah.
have anything change
I know.
simply because,
Yeah.
you've got to get to the point
Right.
in yourself where you're like,
Yeah.
I'm finished with the way that
with
things
me.
have been going,
Yeah.
in my life,
Yeah.
to the point that I'm willing to take responsibility for the one thing that I can change,
Yeah.
and that is this.
I remember at the very beginning of this, somebody invited me to like a boundaries course.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And oh my gosh, because I was raised in a culture where you blame everybody else for everything.
Right.
Nothing's because of you.
Right. Yeah.
The world's problems are because of you.
Right.
You know,
Totally.
right?
Totally.
And so I remember, oh my gosh, just crying my way through that boundaries, Cloud Townsend's boundaries
Yeah.
Right.
course.
Sure.
Yeah.
And there's some marvels like, I can own me.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Like I have a me to own.
Right.
And I can own my own emotions, my own behaviors, my own attitudes. Like I can own my attitudes.
So good.
Yeah.
But wait a minute. I thought you
Right.
made me
made me
mad,
feel
or
Right.
made
bad,
me, uh-huh,
made me
Sure.
mad. You mean you didn't make me feel
Right.
bad or mad?
uh-huh,
I decided to
Right.
be mad?
Right.
uh-huh.
And I'm like, whoa. I mean, I was just like stunned.
Yeah, it's life-changing.
I didn't know I had that kind of agency.
Uh-huh.
I thought life just happened to me.
Hmm.
And now I'm like, oh, Nancy, what little attitude are you choosing right now, girl?
Right.
And I'm like,
then the
you
work
get to choose
begins.
it.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
And I've learned in the long run that is magic.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's empowering and it's agency.
So good. So good. Yeah, I think that's even similar for us, and I think in a little different way when we really begin to seek out help. We came to this place where we were seeking out help, and it had to do probably in a marriage sort of conflict, and it was really not a marriage conflict. It was really my own inability to really process and connect emotionally.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And at that point where we had this conversation, like, we just don't want to do this anymore. And then it moves you to like, okay, we got to do something different.
Yeah.
We got to go find help somewhere. And
Yeah.
I think that's where obviously I do think the Lord steps in and orders the steps.
I think he does.
You know, He'll help
too.
get you
Yeah.
the right place, right people that can help you.
Where does it
address
say
them.
in scripture, like, where does my help come from?
Yeah.
It comes from the Lord.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
don't know where that is.
Yeah, I
but
think Psalms.
Yeah. See, I knew you two would know.
Something.
Yeah,
And I'm
Psalms somewhere between 1 and
120.
150,
There we
somewhere
go.
in
In
there.
the 120s.
right there.
somewhere.
If I get the
The
book, I'm good.
120s.
Yeah, it's in the Bible.
Yeah, and
Yes.
it's like really true.
Yeah.
Like God provides help. And you're right, Gina. Like I've had so many clients. I'm like, that was
Yeah.
a zero. I'm either really a horrible therapist
Right.
or you know what I mean.
Right.
And
No,
we
absolutely.
know that can't be true.
Right.
Well,
so.
it could,
Well, I'm sure
it could
those
be.
battles, like
It could
anything,
be,
you know.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, like some people you're like, wow, they made so much progress in 1 hour together.
Yeah.
And then some people, it's like, I don't think we've made a bit of progress
Yeah.
in 3 months. You know, so you're so right. It's like we have to show up hungry and willing
Yeah.
and ready.
I love that.
And that takes a lot of doing this first.
So good. Well, I love that. And I think that the message I think we want people to walk away from is it's okay to take care of all of those parts of you,
Yes.
you know, and minister healing and strength to all of those, the emotional, the spiritual, the relational, the mental, all of it
Physical.
is physical. All of that is part of what God is working in. And so I think that's super helpful and good stuff.
One thing we didn't talk about, and I know we're wrapping up, is just if you legitimately have been hurt by religion,
Yeah.
I hope that you'll narrow that down instead of just generalize
So
it.
good.
Narrow it down like, oh, I really was hurt by this leader
Right.
or this person. And then do your grief work.
Yeah. So good.
Like grieve.
Yeah.
Grieve. Unfortunately, we humans hurt each other.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I can love you and hurt you.
Yeah. No, that's true.
I have
The
that
good and the
capacity.
bad. Yeah.
I wish I didn't,
Yeah.
you know?
Right. Totally.
But I'm human. I'm flawed. You know, I could love my husband like crazy and then probably cut him with a few words, with like a knife, and go, oh, dang, that was mean. You know, so we're all human.
Yeah.
So, you know, but when we can learn how to do our grief work,
Yeah.
and I think grief work can integrate and go, oh, I love my husband and I can say
Right.
hurtful things.
Right.
My husband loves me and sometimes he acts like a jerk. This leader is, man, that was amazing. And that felt off.
Right.
And then we can learn how to hold the good and the
Yeah.
bad
It's so good. So important.
together
So important.
instead of just projecting, oh, I hate the church.
Yeah.
The church is horrible. The church has just wounded me. And we can stop just projecting and start healing what's inside of us.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's so, and I'm so glad you added that because I think that is a massive piece. That sorting, that processing, grieving, because at the end of the day, you know, there are some people that are purposefully hurtful. There are some
Absolutely.
abusive people out there. There are,
Yeah.
but there's a lot more, I believe, that are just broken people.
Yeah.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
you know, we're not talking about intent, but just they're broken. And
Yep.
we're all that way, and
Yeah.
man, we're sure going to create messes. It's just
Yeah.
so messy everywhere you go, and so
it is.
I think it's so important. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for adding that to it, because I hope it helps somebody
I do
Yes.
too.
to maybe consider
Yes.
how to
Yeah.
move forward
Yeah.
and hold the good and the bad. Such a great
Yeah.
principle. One thing in my personality, it's just so hard to do. Is like, you're either with me, for me, you're
Yeah.
with me, or you're dead to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Sure.
learning that practice of going, well, there's good
Yeah.
and there's bad,
Yeah.
and they're both simultaneously true.
That's right.
And there's probably that's true of me as well, and that helps
Yeah.
you just not make it so.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, just not so massively overwhelming. Just to go,
Yeah.
I can acknowledge the good
Yep.
and the bad.
Well, then when we can get away from that awfulizing and catastrophizing, just to normalizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, we're all humans.
Yeah.
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 Nobody's better than, nobody's worse than.
Yeah.
We're human. We is messy.
Yeah. Do you think that sometimes what I've read a little around this, that, well, sometimes going back to, are you ready for the work? Sometimes we would rather have a villain
Yes.
to blame it
that's
all on
good, Waylon.
than to own.
That's
you know,
true.
because I know I've been there. Like, it's all them, and
Oh my
so
gosh,
I need a villain. So I'll create a villain in the story so that it frees me from the good and bad in me. And when I refuse to make them the villain, and I bring them down to, like, no, there's good and bad.
Yeah.
They're not the villain, and they didn't do anything right.
No.
You know, and yet now I can deal with me.
That's right.
And even how I responded, or how that hurt, and do the grief work. And
Yeah.
such a great process. I think it'd be so helpful if we
Oh,
could
I'm
just
glad you said that.
slow down
Uh-huh.
and just realize, man, we're all broken,
Yep.
and some are more broken than others, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I think we're all there, but
Yeah. think so too.
Nancy, thanks for coming and hanging out
Oh,
with us,
yeah.
and
So
always helpful,
So good to be
always
with you guys. I love you both
such a
so
valuable.
much.
We love
We
you
love
too.
you.
Two of my favorite people. So thank you. I love that we get to talk and visit.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, if this has been helpful on our bonus episode, just make sure you like it and share it. And comments, we'd love to hear how it's impacted you. And make sure that you look up Nancy and follow what she's doing, because it'll continue to be helpful. So we love you, and we'll see you next time.